So before we get started, I just kind of wanted to give you guys an overview of what I'll be covering tonight. So first, I'll start by talking about why nutrition is important for the student athlete. Next, I'll talk about building a performance plate and overall healthy eating. And then I'll talk a little bit about some nutrients of concern in teens, and then the timing of meals and snacks, hydration, and lastly, sports supplements. So why is nutrition important? First off, you guys need proper nutrients to fuel growth and exercise. And also, if you're properly nourished, it'll help maintain focus in the classroom and also in the court or on the field. If you eat the right foods at the right time, it can help increase energy and maximize performance. It can also actually decrease your risk of injury because as you have increased energy, it decreases the risk for strains and tears due to muscle fatigue. And then things like vitamin D and calcium can help to build strong bones and reduce your risk for breaking them. It also can help with recovery, so better food choices will result in decreased soreness and increased endurance. So things like lean proteins and dairy will help to rebuild torn muscle fibers. So I'd like to start off by talking about your overall diet and what that means for your performance. So I like to call this your performance plate. This is a picture of my plate. So it shows you all the different food groups. And so it kind of acts as a guide for what your three main meals should look like, so your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I'm going to talk a little bit more of each of these. So I do want to point out that recommendations are going to vary from person to person. So it can vary depending on age, height, weight, physical activity, and if you're male or female. So for the purpose of this presentation, I decided to create a person so that can help me kind of describe each food group and kind of what's recommended. So this is Sarah. She's 16, she's 5'7", she weighs 130 pounds, and she gets more than 60 minutes of moderate activity on most days. So moderate activity would be things like a brisk walk or swimming. So as student athletes, you guys are definitely getting this. So let's start with whole grains. Whole grains are your energy enhancing foods. So they are rich in carbohydrates and extremely important for your performance. As you can see from the photo here, grains should make up about a quarter of your plate. Sarah would need about 9 ounces per day, and 1 ounce is equivalent to a slice of bread, 1 small tortilla, or half a cup of cooked rice. So the goal for this food group is to make half of your grains whole. Some examples of whole grains include things like 100% whole wheat bread, 100% whole wheat tortillas or pasta, also things like brown or wild rice, as opposed to things like white rice, and then also oatmeal, quinoa, and popcorn. People are always really excited when they hear that popcorn's a whole grain. The next food group is protein. So proteins are your recovery and muscle building foods. So again, extremely important for performance. As you can see from the photo here, you also want about a quarter of your plate to be proteins. Sarah would need about 6.5 ounces per day. 1 ounce is equivalent to 1 ounce weight of cooked lean meats, poultry, or seafood. And then just as like a good guide, 3 ounces looks like about the size of a deck of cards. So that's kind of a good gauge to see what you should be eating. That way you don't have to be weighing everything because let's be realistic, nobody's really going to do that. 1 ounce is also equivalent to an egg or a tablespoon of peanut butter, a quarter cup of cooked beans, or a ½ ounce weight of nuts or seeds. And the goal for this food group is to choose lean proteins. So some examples of lean proteins include things like baked or grilled chicken or turkey, also things like fish. So some good examples are things like salmon or tuna, trout, halibut, also things like pork loin or lean ground beef, eggs, and then also things like nuts and seeds, so like almond butter, peanut butter, and then beans and lentils. So I think these last two sometimes get forgotten as good protein sources. The next food group is fruits and veggies. So fruits and veggies are your immune system boosting foods, so they help keep you healthy, so that way you can perform your best at your games. So Sarah would need about 2 cups of fruit per day. 1 serving is equivalent to 1 cup fresh, frozen, or canned. And also to give you guys a little judge of size, so 1 cup is about the size of a baseball. And 1 serving also counts as a ½ a cup of dried fruit, so things like dried mangoes or dried apricots. Also things like 100% fruit juice, so things like orange juice or pomegranate juice, or even a homemade smoothie would count as well. And then for veggies, Sarah would need about 3.5 cups of veggies per day. So 1 serving is equivalent to, again, 1 cup raw, 1 cup cooked, or 1 cup canned. And then with leafy greens, you need a little bit more for that to count as a serving. So you need 2 cups of things like spinach and spring mix. Also 1 cup of 100% vegetable juice, so like a homemade smoothie again, or like a low sodium V8 juice. And the goal here is to eat a rainbow of colors. And the reason being is that each color has a different type of antioxidant. So you want to eat a variety of them so you're staying as healthy as possible. The next food group here is low-fat dairy. So dairy is both an energy-enhancing food and a recovery and muscle-building food. So they're rich in both carbohydrates and proteins. Sarah would need about 3 cups per day. And you can see from the photo, they're mostly focusing this on things like milk. That could also be things like rice milk or almond milk. But you can also get it from things like yogurt. It can be Greek, it could be regular, or you could do something like cottage cheese, or even things like string cheese. And then the last food group is oils. So oils are your flavor boosting foods as well as overall health. So they're really important for things like eye health, brain health, heart health. So really important to include in your diet. And you want to focus on more of your oils as opposed to saturated fats. So a good example that I like to share that kind of explains the difference is saturated fats tend to be solid at room temperature. So let's say you cooked bacon and you didn't feel like washing the pan, so then it sits out all day. And by the end of the day, you get that white film on that pan. That is saturated fat. If you compare that to something like olive oil in your cupboard that's still liquid at room temperature, that's an oil, that's an unsaturated fat. So that's kind of an easy way to tell the difference. So Sarah would need about 5 to 6 teaspoons of oil per day. That would include things like olive oil, canola oil, sesame oil, also things like avocados or fatty fish, so salmon's a really good source. And then also nut butters, so things like peanut butter, almond butter, and then also oil-based salad dressings. And so like I said, things are going to vary depending on each person. So this resource is an awesome tool if you guys want to jot this website down. I can always come back to it later too. You guys can go here and personalize your plan just for you. So parents, you guys can use this too. It's not just for kids. It'll tell you how much of each food group you should be eating each day. And it's customized based on everything listed there. So as student athletes, you guys not only should focus on your overall diet, but there's also some nutrients of concern that you guys should be aware of. So the first one being omega-3s. So omega-3 fatty acids are an essential fatty acid, meaning that our bodies don't create them, so you guys need to get those things in your diets. There's different kinds of omega-3s, but the 2 that I want to focus on tonight are EPA and DHA. And the reason being is that they are important for optimum brain development. So your guys' brains are still growing and they will continue to grow until about age 20. So DHA has been shown to improve cognition, learning, memory, and school performance. So it's extremely important for you guys to be including this in your diet. It can help with your athletic performance as well. So food sources are basically fish. So if you don't like fatty fish, so things like salmon, tuna, or trout, I do have some solutions for you. But the goal is to get 3 ounces 2 times a week. So it's not very much. That's the good news, 3 ounces being the size of a deck of cards. So if you don't want to eat fish, I would recommend talking to your doctor about maybe doing an omega-3 supplement that has EPA and DHA, so a fish oil, or if you're vegan or vegetarian, you can also do like a microalgae supplement as well. The next nutrient of concern for your age group is vitamin D, which I'm sure you guys all know is extremely important for building strong bones. But the reason why I wanted to bring it up tonight is that bone formation peaks during puberty, and it's critical for long-term bone health. So it's so important for you guys to be including this in your diet right now. Some good food sources, they're kind of limited, but things like salmon, trout, tuna, and then also things like milk and orange juice with added vitamin D are also good sources. And then we have the sun, but in North Idaho, we all know that we don't see the sun as much as we would like all of the months. So, that sometimes isn't a good source as well. So I would highly recommend talking to your doctor about getting your vitamin D levels checked and seeing if you would benefit from a supplement. It's not uncommon for people in our area to have to take a vitamin D supplement. There is controversy in optimum levels, but the recommended dietary allowance is 600 IUs for anyone 9 and older. And then the next nutrient of concern is calcium. So again, calcium helps build those strong bones, and it's important for you guys to include this in your diet. Calcium is something that you can easily get from food, so I wouldn't recommend a supplement. Food sources are mostly dairy products, so things like milk, cheese, yogurt, but you can also get it from calcium fortified soy milk, orange juice, and cereals. So the goal is to get 3 servings of dairy a day, and you guys are probably going to get enough calcium. So good news there. The last nutrient of concern is iron. So iron helps blood carry oxygen throughout the body. Some symptoms of deficiency would be things like fatigue or headache. I know that's extremely vague, so again, talking to your doctor about your iron status is going to be important. This is another thing that you can easily get in your diet, so usually if you're healthy, you're not going to need supplementation. A really good food source is lean red meat, and the reason why is that our body absorbs this iron the best, so this is the best source, but there's also another kind of iron that you can get from things like fortified breads or cereals, beans and spinach and other leafy greens. But if you're choosing to solely eat these foods, if you're not a meat eater, then you want to make sure that you're eating it with foods that are also high in vitamin C, so things like orange juice, because that's going to help with that iron absorption. So that's extremely important. And then I just have the recommendations listed here for you. So what you eat is just as important as when you eat. So let's talk a little bit about timing of meals and snacks. So frequent fueling is going to result in optimized athletic performance. I would recommend 3 meals and then 2 to 4 snacks per day. So I would recommend listening to your hunger cues. If you're hungry, make sure you're eating. You don't want to go too long between meals because you can have stomach pains, irritability, shakes, headache, poor concentration, and we want to decrease this as much as possible. So pre-practice or pre-game snacks, obviously I would recommend waking up, having a performance plate, making sure you're eating a good breakfast. A couple hours later, make sure you're having some sort of snack, and then make sure you're eating lunch, so have another performance plate. And then about 2 to 4 hours before a practice or a game, you want to have a snack with moderate carbs and protein and then low in fat. So a good example would be a turkey sandwich on wheat and a banana and some fluids. And then about a half an hour to an hour before practice or a game, you want to have a small snack with a small amount of carbs and limited fat. So a good example would be something like pretzels or tortilla chips or applesauce, or we have a really good example of a fruit smoothie that you guys can try later. And this is going to help provide energy for your game. And then snacking during practice or a game. So sport drinks can be beneficial if you guys play sports like basketball, soccer, hockey, or football. So those high intensity followed by low intensity recovery periods. Also, if you play or if you participate in cross country or track and you're exercising longer than 60 minutes, you can benefit from a sports drink because it has the electrolytes and the sugars or the carbohydrates to help maintain your energy and also maintain your fluid status. But I really want to stress that it's not necessary for exercise lasting less than 60 minutes. So unless you're pushing it hard longer than 60 minutes, there's no need for this. And then refueling after practice or a game. So as soon as possible after a game or practice, you want to make sure you're getting a snack. One of the best snacks that I would recommend would be chocolate milk. You could also do something like apples and peanut butter or Greek yogurt. We also have another really good smoothie that you guys can try as well. And then within 2 hours after your practice or a game, you want to make sure you're having another performance plate and getting a regular meal in. And this is going to help restore your energy for your next event. Next is hydration. So I talk a lot about food, but hydration is extremely important as well. So it's important for sustaining optimal energy levels. Dehydration can actually negatively impact performance and result in early fatigue. So you want to make sure you're staying hydrated. And this is an ongoing process. You should be drinking water all day, not just around your practice or your games. So before practice or a game, you want to make sure you're starting well hydrated. And then about 1 to 2 hours before, you'd want about 1.5 to 3 cups. And then 10 to 15 minutes before, about 1 to 2.5 cups. And then during your practice or a game, you should be taking 2 to 3 big gulps every 15 to 20 minutes, and then consider that sports drink if you guys are going longer than 60 minutes. And then after practice or a game, you want to have about 2 to 3 cups for every pound lost. And I know it sounds like a lot, but 2 cups is actually equivalent to a pound. And this can come from things like snacks as well. It doesn't just have to be water. So it could include something like your chocolate milk that you're having after your game or your practice, and that can be part of your fluid. So a good way to see if you've lost weight, you can weigh yourself before and after practice or a game. And if you've lost weight, that means you're not doing very good with your hydration and you need to work on drinking more. If you weigh about the same, good news, you're doing great. You can also track your hydration by checking your urine color, and I know it sounds gross, but the lighter the better. So check it out next time you use the restroom. Then the last thing I want to cover is the truth about sports supplements. So poor dietary choices and meal frequency are generally the limiting factors for not reaching your performance goals. So you can't out-supplement a bad diet. I can't stress that enough. So the only thing that I would say is safe to use is sports drinks or gels or chews. And then I would not recommend all others claiming to increase muscle mass, speed, endurance, and fat loss. And the reason being is they simply lack scientific evidence. Also, supplement companies are not required to prove product safety, purity, or effectiveness. And this is actually quite scary, especially for any of you who are considering moving on to playing college sports. So if you're taking a supplement and you don't know what's in it, guess what? If you get tested and now you have a banned substance in your body, you could be disqualified from an event. So it's not worth it. And it doesn't mean that the companies are intentionally putting things in there, but they could have bad practices with producing those supplements where it could be cross-contaminated. And then healthy athletes can get the nutrition they need from food. So if you guys are following the recommendations I've shared tonight, you're going to do quite well. Also, supplements are expensive, so don't waste your money. So I've talked about a lot tonight, so I just wanted to say, start with small changes. Don't expect to do everything at once. It's not going to be sustainable. And then take one day at a time. You could also team up, find a friend that has similar goals and work together. And lastly, celebrate success. So think of each change as a win. So that's all I have for you guys tonight. Does anybody have any questions? That's a really good question. So chocolate milk is known as one of the best recovery drinks. They have it on a lot of chocolate milk supplements. So you see that it's kind of advertised that way. And it's because there is a perfect ratio of carbs to protein. I believe it's 3-to-1. And so that actually enhances glycogen storage. Glycogen is the stored form of carbohydrates in our muscles. And so when you drink that, it kind of helps with that restorative energy process. Good question. Yeah, so if you're doing that, you want to make sure that you're having a snack before. You never want to go participate in anything on an empty stomach. But I also would stress the importance of not trying to implement something new on a very important event, because you could have GI upset, and that's not good for an event either. And then if you have a tournament where you're doing stuff all day, you want to make sure, I would guarantee that that sports drink, so like a Gatorade or something, is going to help. And also having snacks with a small amount of carbs in between. So things like milk or like pretzels, also things like homemade smoothies. So like the green smoothie would be a really good option for you to kind of have made and take with you. But making sure you're still eating small amounts between those events is going to be important. Did you have a question too?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you could talk about some of the negative effects. I know there's a lot of teenagers here of consuming fast foods.
Oh gosh. Do you want me to do another presentation?
No, just briefly. I mean, most people know, but I think a lot of the kids aren't necessarily aware of the performance effect that it can have if you overconsume too much fast food.
Yeah, so fast food tends to be really high in saturated fat as well as sodium, which are two things that I think in general our country consumes more of than they should. And so if you're eating these foods, it can kind of lag you down, and eating foods that are high in saturated fat take longer to digest. So even though it tastes good, it can kind of hang out in your stomach longer and can negatively impact performance, because now you're trying to participate in a sport and have a full stomach, and that's never a good thing. Also, they're just not very high in your vitamins and minerals and nutrients in general. So if you're going to be eating foods, you should be making them count and eating those nutrient-dense items like fruits and vegetables and lean proteins, and your lean or low-fat dairy products is going to be much better choices than your fast food. However, I do know sometimes when you're traveling for sports and you don't have very many options, sometimes it's the only thing. So I would recommend doing just something very small from a fast food, like chicken strips or something, just to get something in your stomach, as opposed to going long periods without eating. So, yeah.
Okay, so I have a friend that swears by whey or something, like the shakes.
The whey protein.
Mm-hmm. So that has no positive effect.
So whey protein is basically just a condensed form of the protein that's in milk. So that chocolate milk is going to be cheaper, and it's probably going to taste better, because sometimes that whey protein tastes kind of crummy. And also there could be things in there that we don't know about. So just like I said with the supplements, there can be ingredients that are harmful that aren't even listed on there that would not be good for you to be consuming. So have her drink chocolate milk. She might like it better.
Thank you.